You've always wanted to see the Amazon, and the Rainforest Cafe at Disney World didn't quite cut it. So you start planning a trip to Peru. You research guided tours and river cruises, and you make a list of all the wildlife you want to see, like giant river otters, tapirs, and macaws, which you are confident are cooler than animatronic gorillas. You think maybe you can even squeeze in a visit to Machu Picchu or some Inca ruins in Cusco. But while you're planning and researching, you find some troubling stuff, like that millions of people visit Peru each year, and that many tourists can have a huge impact on wildlife, natural landscapes, and the people who live there. In fact, traveling anywhere can have a big impact on communities and environments. Your findings put a huge damper on your plans. You'd still love to experience Peru, but now you're not really sure if you should. Hi, I'm Miriam Nielsen, and I'll be your tour guide for Study Hall Sustainability. I know what you're thinking. Oh no, here comes Study Hall to ruin another one of my favorite things. Hopefully you mean traveling, not the Rainforest Cafe. And I'm not going to force you to cancel all your vacations, but the question of whether to travel and how to do it responsibly is a big one. All kinds of travel and tourism in all kinds of destinations, whether you're backpacking through Europe, road tripping around the United States, or taking a cruise to Antarctica, affects landscapes and communities. And to figure out whether and how to travel, we need to know about those impacts. Like on that trip to Peru. First, you've got to get there. Tourism often relies on emissions-intensive modes of transportation, aka airplanes. A person on a one-way flight from New York to Cusco, Peru is responsible for about 2.4 tons of carbon dioxide. That's enough emissions to melt 70 square feet of Arctic sea ice. Then once you're in Peru, the buses, boats, and even walking trails you use to get around have an environmental impact too. Machu Picchu and the Inca Trail have seen a lot of erosion and become cluttered with waste from tourists. And boats can pollute rivers and disturb wildlife and ecosystems. Then there's hotels and lodging. It takes a lot of water and energy to build and run hotels and their laundry rooms, pools, and spas, and most of them aren't using renewable energy. Plus, as more and more hotels pop up in areas that don't have infrastructure for them, it can lead to a lot of waste that cities can't get rid of. Beyond the environmental impacts, tourism also affects the lives and well-being of local people who live in tourist destinations year-round. Like most industries, tourism is interested in growth, and that means getting more and more people to travel each year. But over time, that means all kinds of destinations, from Cusco to Venice to Phuket to Niagara Falls, and even the Rainforest Cafe, have become too crowded. This over-tourism can lead to higher rent for local residents and businesses, crowded roads, increased pollution, and protests and unrest among locals who would prefer to keep their communities tourist-free. Which means clearly tourism is bad, and you should definitely cancel that trip to Peru and never travel again. Except here's the thing, travel and tourism are important to international and local economies. In 2023, tourism contributed 9.1% of the global GDP and introduced 27 million new jobs for people around the world. And some countries are really dependent on those tourism dollars and jobs. In the Bahamas, 50% of their GDP comes from tourism. Plus, when a place is a tourist destination, the amenities and infrastructure built to encourage people to visit, like roads, walkable areas, and maybe even rainforest cafes, benefit people living there too. And tourism helps travelers learn about new places and people, hopefully giving them broader perspectives and encouraging them to become more passionate about protecting people and places across the world. So that means we have to look for ways to keep the good stuff about tourism while keeping the less good stuff under control. One way people have tried to make tourism more sustainable is with ecotourism. The idea is to visit more natural sites like national parks and plan these trips in a way that considers how all aspects of tourism impact local and global environmental resources, communities, and tourists themselves. Advocates of ecotourism say it's about being the most mindful, responsible traveler you can be. That means trying not to harm the environment, spending your dollars in places that will go to locals and conservation efforts, and being culturally respectful. For example, on your trip to Peru, maybe you decide to stay away from Machu Picchu and visit Manu National Park instead. While there, you could look for tour companies and experiences run by locals. That way, your money would go toward the local economy, not a corporation like the Rainforest Cafe, and you'd be more likely to get a more informative and accurate picture of the history and significance of the places you're seeing. You could also look for ways to explore the park that are less invasive for the people, plants, and animals living there. For example, canoe trips are a popular way to explore the park, but those tours can disturb wildlife, so instead you could choose to experience nature from a distance, like from the park's observation towers. And then there's your souvenirs. Buying local goods is a great way to support local people and businesses, but it's a good idea to do some research so you know what you're buying. For example, mahogany crafts are common in Peru, but logging mahogany is super destructive to the rainforest, animal habitats, and the homes of indigenous people, so it's best to stay away from these kinds of products. Over the years, interest in ecotourism has grown, and between 2022 and 2023, tourism to national parks, wildlife and marine reserves, and indigenous territories rose by almost 18%. But the rise in ecotourism hasn't all been positive. In fact, it's still come with a lot of problems, and that doesn't necessarily lead to more sustainability. Ecotourism has become a big industry, and businesses want in. Like in Wolong National Reserve in China, a mountainous area that's home to many endangered species, including pandas and snow leopards. Many ecotourists go there to hike and spot wildlife, and their presence requires infrastructure developments like restaurants, hotels, and souvenir shops, which sounds like it might be great for the local economy. But 80% of the jobs in these industries have actually gone to non-locals. And ironically, more ecotourism can be harder on the environment. More people means more wear and tear on park trails and ecosystems, including waste and pollution, soil erosion, and water contamination. The more popular these locations become, the more rainforest cafes get built up around them. Plus, local guides become more likely to be overworked and stressed along with the influx of tourists. So even if ecotourists mean well, they haven't always had the intended impact. That means the tourism industry needs to go a step beyond ecotourism to really make travel better for people and environments. In other words, we need to embrace sustainable tourism. That's an approach that focuses on the long-term and big picture impact of all kinds of tourism and the industry as a whole. It has more to do with the ways governments and businesses approach tourism than individual choices about how to travel. For example, tourism makes up around 80% of the economy in the Galapagos Islands, and the islands get 150,000 visitors each year who want to see giant tortoises, Darwin's finches, and tiny penguins all in one place. But too much tourism, involving foot traffic, waste, and damage from boats, can harm the Galapagos' unique ecosystems. So the Galapagos National Park Directorate and Ecuadorian Ministry of Tourism have implemented some regulations, like limiting visitor numbers in certain areas. They also encourage all visitors to work with accredited tour companies that are committed to conservation. And these tour companies need to follow regulations for conserving water, using local products, recycling, and hiring local employees. And more governments are taking a page from the Galapagos Islands Guidebook. In locations from Venice to Kyoto, governments have introduced restrictions to protect against over-tourism. In 2024, Nepal's Supreme Court told the government to give out fewer permits for climbing Mount Everest to protect the mountain and the safety of climbers and local guides. Peru has made changes too. They're limiting the number of visitors to Machu Picchu, the Inca Trail, and Manu National Park, providing education about how to visit responsibly and building more sustainable lodging using local materials. Manu National Park also hires guides from local communities, and entry fees go toward local projects like building schools and providing clean water. These kinds of changes ultimately make tourism better for the local environment and communities and lead to better experiences for tourists as well. Other sustainable tourism strategies include looking for ways to reduce the environmental impact of transportation, like by reducing air travel altogether. In 2018, the Swedish Flygskam or flight shaming movement gained momentum. It encouraged people to travel by train instead of planes wherever possible. If they did, they could do some train bragging and smugly post a photo of their environmentally conscious travel online. Over 18 months, the number of Swedes who said they were opting for trains over flights rose 20%. Unfortunately, for those of us in the US, long-distance train travel can be more emissions-heavy than driving or even flying. Unless you're on the only electric Amtrak line, maybe don't brag about how you're saving the planet. But even for people in the US, another option is slow travel or slow tourism. If you have the time and resources, that might mean traveling really slowly, like by sailing instead of flying. But it can also just mean changing how you plan your trip. Think of how someone from the US might travel in Australia. Maybe it's a once-in-a-lifetime trip and they want to see everything, so they plan to arrive in Sydney to see the Opera House, fly up north to see the Great Barrier Reef, then fly to the center of the country to see the Outback before heading back to Sydney to catch the return flight. The slow travel approach might prioritize just one of those locations instead. You might not see all of Australia's greatest hits, but you'll gain the opportunity to connect more with a local community and you'll have less of a carbon footprint since you're not moving around as much. And there's also always the option of a staycation. It's exciting to see new places, but that doesn't mean you have to fly across the ocean. Exploring your own local communities can be invigorating too, and it comes with the added bonus of making you better connected to your local community and environment, and in turn, hopefully taking a little more responsibility in caring for them. So does that mean you should just birdwatch for blue jays in your own backyard instead of seeking out the macaws in Peru? Well, I don't know. There's no one right answer here. And as with so much in sustainability, our individual choices are just one piece of the puzzle. But asking the question is a good start. That question can lead to other questions about why we want to travel, what we can do while we're traveling, and what we can do to support and enjoy our own communities when at home. And then those questions can help us seek out experiences that are responsible and considerate, prioritizing care for landscapes and communities over the profits from yet another overpriced meal next to an animatronic gorilla at the Rainforest Cafe. If you're enjoying this series and are interested in taking the full Study Hall Sustainability course and earning college credit from ASU, check out GoStudyHall.com or click on the button to learn more. And if you want to help us out, give this video a like, comment and tell us about the worst tourist you've ever seen, and smash that subscribe button. Thanks for watching, see you next time.